So hello everyone, my name is Zulkarnain and welcome back to my channel. So in today's session, we are going to learn about the Docker network and we will see what is the use cases of Docker network and how many network types do we have available in Docker. So let's start and let's come on to the server on which we already have installed the Docker. So if I execute here Docker network ls, as you can see here we have three network types. First one is bridge, second one is host and third one is none. So these three network types come by default with Docker. Means whenever you install the Docker, so it comes with them. So yes, so the Docker uses the bridge network as a default. Means so whenever you create any kind of container, so Docker uses bridge network to provide network to your container. For example, let's understand over the documentation. Here already I have mentioned three network types. So firstly, we will understand like what is the bridge network. So as I already have told you, like whenever you create any kind of container, so Docker uses bridge network. So let's create our container and check like where it uses it. For example, I will execute docker run -d and nginx. So here you can see if I execute docker ps, so here we have like one container is running. I will simply copy the container id and I will execute docker inspect and then I will give the container ID. So here we have like container information as you can see, which is currently running. So for example, if you look here, we have an IP address which is totally different from my host network. So here's my host network, which is CIDR is this one, and here you can see like the IP address is totally different from this CIDR. Okay, so if I just copy this IP address and try to access my container web page from here. So here you can see I'm not able to access my nginx web page which is running inside the container. Why? Because here like Docker is using bridge network which is totally isolated from my host network. Means the container is also isolated, but the network which we are using, it is also isolated from my host network. So that is why like I'm not able to access my nginx web page over my host network. Okay, now if I want to access my nginx web page and the container like services which is running inside the container, so I'll have to use docker port mapping concept. Means without having the docker port mapping concept, I cannot just access my application over my host network. Yes, and on previous video which I already have explained like what is the docker port mapping concept. Okay, now come on to the second one. So second one is like here we have docker host network. Okay, so let's understand firstly what is docker host network. So firstly we need to understand like how bridge network works. Okay, if I use the container image here, let's suppose here is our container. Okay, so whenever you use container with network type bridge, so Docker provides a isolated IP to your container so that it is totally isolated from your host network. Means whenever you create any kind of container, so Docker gives a unique IP address which is totally different from your host network. That is why like you will have to use port mapping concept here, and that is why like it is totally isolated from your host network. But here in host network, what happens? So as you can see like here we have our host network. So means what do we call it? We call it host network. It is our actual network. So yes, Docker has one more option which is called host network. Means if you don't want to isolate your this network and you want to simply use your host network inside the container over the container also, so you can use the network type as a host. Means whenever you will create a container network type host on the server, so it will use your actual host IP address. Okay, and it will provide the same features and same like networking concept which is there on your host network. For example, as we all know, if I want to access this Nginx web page over my host network. So I'll have to use the Docker port mapping concept. Okay, so definitely I will have to use the -p with the while creating the Docker. Okay, now I will yes remove this container, and then I will create container again. Now I will use the network type as a host. So I will simply give the hyphen network, and I will give here host. Okay, then I will give the Nginx. So here you can see we have one container, okay, which is running as a network type host. So if I execute net state hyphen -1 and grep 80, so here you can see one service is running over the 80 port, which is called Nginx. So now let's come on to the browser and try to access our application with our host IP address. So here you can see I'm getting a response and web page which is running inside my container, and here I'm not using any kind of port mapping concept because it is totally running over my host network. And here you can see the my IP address also. So here's my IP address, and which also I'm using here. So that without yes using the port mapping concept, I'm able to access my web page over the my host network. Yes, so yes means this is the difference between the bridge network and the host network. For example, if you want to like access your application over the network, and so you'll have to use port mapping concept over the yes while creating the container. Why? Because your container uses different IP address which is provided by the Docker. Okay, but in host network it doesn't happen because it uses your host IP address. So that is why like you don't need to use port mapping concept. So whatever you run, whether it is running over the 80 port or it is running over 3000 port, you don't need to give the port mapping concept here. Okay, now these are the like difference between the network type. So yes, let's come on to the third one. So third one already we have mentioned here, the network type is none. Okay, now let's understand what is none. For example, none is nothing. You can yes take it as a host network, means whenever whatever like you will run, yes it uses also your host network, but internet won't work inside your container. Means like it your container will run as a locally. You cannot access an internet facility inside the container. So that time we use it none network. For example, yes means like you are working any kind of project, okay, and in that like you don't want to give internet connectivity to your container, so that time you can use a none network. Okay, so that's how like these three works, and this is the difference between them. So on next video we are going to see the Docker volume concept, and if you really like this topic, don't forget to like and subscribe also. Thank you so much.